Hello, friends, and welcome to FM On Demand with Tara Fitzpatrick, the podcast of Food Management Magazine. I'm your host, Tara Fitzpatrick. On this episode, we're continuing to chug along with our little mini series about the winners of our healthcare recipe contest. And today we are talking to Jeffrey Quasha. He is a chef that's one of the main creative people at Morrison Healthcare. And this is an organization that they really are ahead of the curve in terms of a lot of things. And we have written about them a lot. And I've featured Jeffrey, but never really in this format before. So this is exciting. We get to know him a little bit better. And we have really good conversation about food as medicine and kind of the things that are just sort of on the docket for healthcare dining and trends that are coming up. It's research and development kind of talk. So if you're interested in some trends, food trends just in general, he's a really good guy to listen to. And we also talk about, he was classically French trained chef. And we talk about why that still is relevant for kitchens. Like it's the language and that kind of stuff is pretty interesting. So if you want to geek out on some chef talk, this is the podcast for you. Thanks so much, and please enjoy. Welcome, Jeffrey. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is absolutely an amazing opportunity. Thank you so much.
For sure. And our little series about the winners of the healthcare recipe contest still going strong. Jeffrey is a winner. It's the Mediterranean meze plate. And it's just the perfect sort of feel good lunch, if you will. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit, how did this come to be? And the Mediterranean diet is tied into this too, obviously, in the name.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of what the direction that we're doing currently in Morrison Healthcare is we're trying to take the word hospital out of hospital food. For years we've had this distinction about retail food, patient food, doctor's dining food.
Yeah.
And now the only focus now is just putting great food on the plate. We just want to start with great food first. So the Mediterranean or the mez plate that we created was kind of one of the first recipes that we started to test the waters of how far we can now push the boundaries with creating amazing guest experiences for our patients. So, as I eat out, and I know, as you dine out frequently too, like me, we're foodies. We love to go out and we love starters. We like to eat with our fingers, or, we like a little bit, right? A little bit of knowledge, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And, when you think about a mez plate, and even what's happening with charcuterie or the mez, everyone likes that little bit of that sampler, but also how big, the Mediterranean diet is. People are very, keto-centric, or they're really watching what they eat. So they want to, it's a little bit of a sampler. So our combination of, we have this amazing herb tabbouleh with some crispy falafel, pickled onions. Of course, you have to have some tzatziki, Kalamata olives, and some pita to dip in. Like I'm a dipper and eater type of person. I want to rip it, dip it, and eat it. So I think that's kind of was the inspiration for the mez plate.
Yeah, for sure. Dipping is where it's at. I just recently, I was a little late to the party, but I started watching Only Murders in the Building with my daughter.
Yep.
And Martin Short's character, who is stealing the whole show, by the way. I love him. And he is a big dipper. Like he's very into like having dips all around. So this goes right into it. And a lot of times, sometimes on restaurant menus, I notice the most creative and like the best at the end of the meal, I'm like, boy, those appetizers were the best thing that we had.
Correct.
Sometimes
yes.
It's like changing the way that we eat, because sometimes when it comes time to like order this big lumbering entree, you're like, oh, geez, like I'd rather just have a little of this and a little of that. So
No, that's perfect
yeah.
answer, because I'm a shareable type of person. Like I love to like order every appetizer on the menu, and it's just a different way of eating. We're not center of the plate is completely changed, like the perception. I think also after COVID, people are just more cognitive of how they're creating their plate presentations. So small plates, I think, is definitely the future.
For sure. And I like how you mentioned kind of trying to erase that dichotomy between patient side and retail side, because I know when I talk to healthcare operators, I use that lingo, but this is kind of a nice way to like, everyone is going to be getting something that's awesome. So for sure.
And then when you think about some of the other videos that you've done and some of the other podcasts, now you're talking about purchasing alignment. You're talking about cross-utilization of products. Like there shouldn't be any differentiation between, patient, retail, doctors dining, and catering. it's all the same food, and it just starts with great, amazing food first. So, imagine
Yeah.
a doctor walking into a patient's room, and then right in front of them, there's that Mediterranean mez plate, and the doctor comments, "Oh my gosh, I had that yesterday in the cafeteria," or "I had that in the doctor's dining room." Or when a nurse walks into a room and the patient's like, "Well, how's the food?" And now the patient and the nurse is saying the food is absolutely amazing. Like, that totally changes the guest
Yes.
experience, because the narrative now changes. So like I said, if we can take the word hospital, hospital and hospitality are so tied together. So that's what we're trying to
Yeah.
drive hospitality within our walls. And like I said, that elevates and changes the entire guest experience.
Absolutely. There still is that stigma. There still is the feeling for so many people that, oh, hospital food, it's bad. It's just like a bad situation all around. And it really, and it's kind of so ingrained in people. So doing stuff like this is a great way to show like, hey, it's different. And I wanted to find out too about some stuff that you've been doing over the summer or happening into early fall, like some projects that Morrison has been developing. What are some interesting things that
Yeah, no,
cross for you?
I don't think we ever stopped developing. I've
Right.
been I've been a research and development chef for Morrison for over 8 years, and we're always planning a year to almost 2 years out. So in the fall, we're actually going to launch a Filipino concept, a Peruvian concept, a ceviche concept, and then a kicked up Korean barbecue concept with some Korean corn dogs. So that's more on the retail side, but
Oh, it's like hitting so many trends there. Like I'm getting so many ideas for stories just hearing that. I
yeah,
always lately I've really been hearing that Filipino food, it's coming. It's going to be like people are
yeah.
going to start appreciating it more. Could you give us like a little bit of a primer? Like what are some of the characteristics of Filipino food? Because I don't think most people really have a good like idea in their head. Like what are some of the things that you're working on for that or that part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think lumpia is one of the biggest dishes that we have, or you have adobo. So, a lot of times when we're doing, you got to be careful these days, especially with, the social media, or, if you call something Filipino, you have to try to push it as far as
Yeah.
it truly is in terms of ethnic. When you define something as ethnic or as Filipino.
Or
So, of
authentic.
course,
Yeah. Yeah.
correct. And
Mm-hmm.
using authentic ingredients, like I think banana ketchup is a condiment that is known to be with Filipino cuisine.
I
So,
can't even imagine that. My brain is like, what would that flavor be? What I'm
oh,
not
it's
the world's
it's
biggest banana fan, but I mean,
right.
I would try it.
And it's yellow. So I mean, of course, we have that stigma of ketchup
Yep.
being red tomato. But
Yes.
so
Yes.
we have an adobo bowl. We also did a form of, like I said, of lumpia, but I'm all about deconstructing things. So lumpia
Yeah.
is crispy, and it's got this amazing flavor, and it's it's similar to like an egg roll in a sense. So
Yeah.
I love ripping things open. Jay
Hmm.
Zabrowski, or Chef Jay-Z, is my R&D chef in charge of retail. So, we like to reimagine food. So if you ripped open lumpia and deconstructed it, what would that look like? And then would that be over rice? And what are the traditional condiments?
Yeah.
So
Is there
because
usually meat in there? It's like a protein. I believe that I had this at a block party. I think there was a gentleman that they said these are like Filipino egg rolls, basically, is what they were
correct.
saying.
So a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
times it has pork, but we also like to do things vegetarian. We've done it where we've partnered with Impossible, where it might be plant forward
Hmm.
or plant based.
Yeah.
So like I said, we have the deconstructed lumpia bowl. We're doing like an infused spritz, like a mango style spritz. But I mean, you have that Southeast Asian influence. Of course, you have an American influence too, but then you have more of a like a Japanese and Chinese influence. So
Yeah.
it's a hodgepodge. It's like a melting pot.
Yeah. They
So
have their own melting pot
correct.
in the Philippines. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's such a large country, so
Yeah.
every island, of course, has its own flavor
Oh, I'm
profile.
sure we could get into regions like the sort of the same way we've seen with Mexico, where it's like instead of just Mexican food, it's like we now know that something is Oaxacan or whatever it may be. So yeah, there's a lot to explore
Right.
just geographically for sure.
And then because of social media and because of Yelp, and you talked about this authentic regionalism, you just have to really make sure when we're doing these types of concepts, and this will be like our 80th concept that we're launching after we launch Korean barbecue. So
Wow.
it's
That's
yeah,
amazing.
like I said, we never stop being busy. And then on the patient side, we just launched a salad series and then a sandwich series. So previously we didn't have any, we did we didn't have a lot of like holiday promotions or LTOs for patients. We always did LTOs for retail. I think at least 24 a year. So
Yeah.
now this year we just did 16 LTOs for patients and then 12 holiday promotions. So every month of the year, there's a holiday promotion for patients. If it's a barbecue salmon with sauteed collard greens on top of cheddar cheese grits, which I would pay $30 in a restaurant to go
Oh,
eat
yeah.
that. But
Mm-hmm.
now our patients get to have that, for January, for New Year, New You.
I
So
love
there's some
it.
form of a celebration plate. And then the cool thing was we did a plant-based version for every single one of those. So if it
Nice.
wasn't a barbecued salmon, we actually did a charred roasted barbecued cauliflower head on top of
Ooh,
the same setup with the collard greens. And, why can't a vegetarian or someone who's, veg centric to a plant forward have an amazing
yeah.
meal just as cool as what we did for somebody who was more meat centric?
Yes, that's so true. And that's, a common misperception about Southern food is that like it's all bad for you.
Right.
There's tons of greens that are within it. And yeah, corn. Absolutely. And I was thinking too, we wanted to get just a little bit of your background and how you came to be. So tell us, where did you grow
Yes.
up? How did you learn how to cook?
So I grew up in Boston, which I have zero accent.
You
So
don't.
no, you couldn't even tell.
I don't
But
hear any of the pack the car and my
no,
Boston
if I'm
accent is terrible. All my accents are terrible. That's part of the fun.
no, I think if I'm around my parents enough, then my
Okay.
accent will come out.
Okay.
But I grew up in Boston. My grandmother, my grandmother on both sides were Russian, including my great grandmother. So I used to sit in the kitchen on a little stool and then watch my grandparents cook when I was a kid. And a
Oh,
lot of the heritage that I was always taught is oral heritage. The oral heritage or the tradition of our family actually happens in the kitchen. And
yep.
so a lot of the recipes that I learned as a kid, my mother, my grandmother, and all their sisters would come and they would make amazing, family meals on Friday or on Sunday. And I would get to sit there and I watched it. And then, of course, I watched Julia Child and Martin Yan and
Hmm.
Justin Wilson, the
Oh
Cajun chef.
yeah, I love him. Yes, I remember
So,
watching him with my mom. Yep.
well, and before there was the Food Network, of course, there was
Yeah,
just PBS.
it was
So,
PBS. Yep.
I went to high school. I actually have a degree in criminology and criminal justice.
So
Um,
cool.
and then I went to culinary school after that. But I've been cooking since I was 14. My background, of course, is I'm super classically French trained, five
Nice.
star, five dining, some of the coolest restaurants and hotels in the country, like the Breakers and
Oh yeah.
um, the Brazilian Court. And then I was a chef at the Peabody in Memphis.
Oh
Um,
yes, I remember that you had mentioned that earlier at the, and I know how to pronounce the Peabody is how
yes,
everybody says it. I think
right.
a woman I used to work with told me that she was like the fanciest thing in the South that you could know of that we went as a family like together. It was a big special deal was the Peabody for like maybe brunch on Sundays they went or
Yep.
something like that. It was like very much like a this is an occasion type
So
place to
I
go.
think it's the rooftop brunch on Sundays, which is probably one of the things. But the Peabody is known as the gateway to the South, and
Mhm.
I got to privilege of working for two master French chefs, and at the Peabody was Jose Gutierrez, who's his lineage actually goes back to like Paul Bocuse. So I had some amazing mentors that I got to train under, and
Oh
then
yeah.
before I think I was 24 years old and I was the executive chef at the Peabody before moving over to Opryland in Nashville. And I was the senior executive chef at the Opryland Hotel in Nashville.
I got to
Uh,
tour that place one time, and that was incredible. There's a whole world behind the scenes there.
yeah,
And a lot of it is a central kitchen and a bakery. And I remember real distinctly seeing a guitar and a bread guitar. I was like,
right.
okay, they do some amazing things there. It's wild.
Yeah, it's a city. I mean,
Yeah.
2,400 plus rooms. I think
Oh, yeah.
there's 5 levels underneath it. Like you would get lost trying to go from location to location.
And all the
But
great country music icons that have been through
oh
there.
yeah.
That vibe is like very much there. Super cool.
And then you had to cook for them, all the time when they were performing at the Opry. But
Did you who was the biggest star that you had to cook for at the Opry?
I don't get starstruck. I get chef struck.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, like, Pam Tillis would be in for dinner, or, Vince Papaya from, the movie with the Jets, and Riddick Bowe was in, and but then, I used to do a lot of special events and celebrity cooking events, but I think if I get more scared when I'm cooking for Thomas Keller or
Oh, for sure. Who wouldn't
Nancy
be?
Silverton or Alice Waters when I had to do when we did a
I
James
think
Beard dinner
I would
and
want
I
to
had to
cook
cook
for
dinner for
Alice.
them. No,
Oh
I
my
was
God.
scared.
That would be
Yeah.
terrifying. Oh my gosh. She's so no nonsense. She's what we need kind of at the voice. This is a different subject, but the voice for K through 12 and for the living, the edible classroom type thing. Like, cause she's just uncompromising in her beliefs that like every kid should have fresh food. And like, we need people like that are really like
Yeah.
extreme. Yeah, what a treasure. I try not to get too when I see like I don't like to bother celebrities. Like I think the last one that I bothered was Elvis Costello. And it was like after a concert. So I went up and it was okay. But for the most part, I just want to leave them alone. So
Well,
that
they're
makes
off
sense.
work, so they want to have their freedom and their time.
Yeah, it's like they're people too. But anyhow, so you were there and then you made the move into non-commercial food service.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting. It was my wife. Her mother had cancer twice,
Hmm.
so my wife actually, she found out the news that her mother had breast cancer again, and then she looked to me and said, we need to move, we need to go.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we actually both, gave our notice, quit our jobs, and on a whim packed up, left Nashville, and moved to Columbia, South Carolina, where
Wow.
I wound up becoming a corporate chef for Ruth's Chris, and my wife, moved into a different practice that she was working in, and that kind of
Did it.
changed, like, kind of the dynamic of my career, going from five-star,
Mhm.
five dining, five, fine dining hotels and
Yeah.
restaurants, to being a corporate chef for Ruth's Chris, which I love because I didn't realize how much they scratch cooked, and how much food
Oh
that
yeah. It's
yeah,
not
and
the bags. It's they're
no,
doing it there. That's cool.
and it was an amazing brigade system that they had in place. And then,
Oh
of
yeah.
course, the economy bottomed out. It was one of the stock market crashes. I think it was around 2007, and
Yeah.
my job was eliminated. So all of a sudden, I didn't have a job. The housing and stock market crashed, and
Yeah, that
um,
was a bad economic time
yep.
for sure. Yeah.
And I wound up in K through 12, and luckily I'm really big into the ACF, and I
Mm,
reached
nice.
out to the ACF in Columbia, South Carolina, and within a week I was working, and I was in K through 12, and I was managing 32 schools. I
Oh.
called myself the head lunch lady, and I think it was probably one of the most humbling career moves in my entire life.
Yeah.
Is one, the blessing of serving 45,000 meals to children almost on a daily basis, but then
Yeah.
two, having the ability to write the menus for North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee, as a regional chef, in K through 12, was probably one of the highlights of my career. I absolutely love that opportunity.
That's so cool. And you have kids too, right?
Yes, I have two boys, 12 and 14. So
Yes.
they're my biggest critics and my sous
Uh-huh.
chefs. So yeah.
For sure. And that leads me into asking, what have you been cooking for them at home lately?
Yeah, I prep every Sunday, and like I said, they're my biggest critics. So as we're developing recipes, so we have a brand new jerk chicken recipe with red beans and rice with some callaloo for patients that we're developing.
So cool.
So actually that's going to be what's for dinner tonight. And then after, I have to modify it for textured, and as for chopped and ground and texture modifications for our patients, my kids, they constantly are the guinea pigs for what I'm developing from an R&D standpoint.
Nice, lucky kids. And I think you had mentioned that when you do have to travel for work, which is kind of a lot, you will leave stuff behind in the fridge for them to find throughout the week. Like I think you said something about an egg roll bowl that sounded amazing. Like
Yep, yep.
is that kind of like cabbage is in there in the mix somewhere?
Yeah, probably one of the easiest recipes that you can do, and it's so keto centric. Low carb,
Hmm.
big protein. But if you just ground, like what I do, or what's in our recipe, is we actually ground turkey, and you could actually pull the turkey out with with garlic and ginger and lemongrass, and then you add a package of pre-cut shredded cabbage mix, your coleslaw mix, and then
Yep.
of course,
Yep.
I start putting some soy, citrus. I love putting lime juice into most dishes that we do. By
Yeah.
developing flavor, I can actually decrease the sodium. And it's one of the
Hmm.
techniques I use as a healthcare chef. But then I finish it with a hoisin and a little bit of sesame oil, and that's it.
Mwah. Chef's
And
kiss.
yeah, in less than 10 minutes, I can create a meal that, feeds my family. But we also have this as a retail concept throughout all of Morrison Healthcare. And then we've also moved it over to the patient side.
Very cool. That is, and food as medicine. I wanted to find out
Yeah.
one thing is, how can we keep that on the forefront? People have started to kind of pick up on this idea, especially in healthcare dining, on the forefront. Obviously, it makes sense. But how can we sort of like keep the momentum going for it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think after the pandemic, I think some people weren't fully on the bus, of course, before the pandemic, but after the
Yeah.
pandemic, a lot of people realized that, food is an important part of not just
Mhm.
making you feel better, but it also has to do with mental health and then, of course, physical health. So
Yep.
you are what you eat.
Mhm.
So being cognitive of not just what you're putting into your body, but where your food comes from. And then
Yeah.
when you start thinking about, eating local, eating right, we always talk
Yeah.
about menuing the right food in the right months. And part of
Mm-hmm.
that is making sure you don't eat a tomato salad in December when tomatoes aren't in season. That's
No,
something you want to
no.
eat in the summertime. So part of that is just not just, like I said, physical health, but of course mental health. How do we keep that in the forefront? A lot of it is our partnerships. We do teaching kitchens
Oh yeah.
throughout a lot of our hospitals, where we're teaching not only the patients but also the caretakers, the caregivers, and then of course the employees. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, a lot of people don't understand that cooking could be simple. And if you do think about
Mm-hmm.
what you're eating, in the beginning of the week, and you're not, with two kids who play sports constantly, one of the
Yeah.
worst things I can do is eat fast food or pizza on a nightly basis. So that's part of the reason that we meal prep.
Yeah.
So then when we're running in the house at 7:30 at night, it's not convenient
Mm-hmm.
eating. We're eating because we're eating something that we enjoy and we love. Um,
Yeah.
and
I
I
like
think that's
that.
all part
Yeah.
of, the healing power of food. I used to tell my dietitians, if when I was in K through 12, if the only thing getting fat is the trash can and the kids aren't eating the food, then it's not, it sounds great on paper, but if they're not eating it, then they're not getting the nutrients that they need. And that's part of the reason that, like I said, we're taking the word hospital out of hospital food. We just want to start
Yeah.
with great food first, is because we get 3 chances a day,
Mm-hmm.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to really give somebody an amazing sustainable meal that's full
Yeah.
of, packed with nutrients and flavor and love. So, and that's part of the healing power of food, is
Oh
we want to
yeah.
get people to try something. And in the 2.5 days is our average guest stay in our hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
But in that 2.5 days, imagine if we gave them 3 amazing meals per day and they ate it.
Mm-hmm.
Then that was our goal, of course, is just to deliver
To
amazing
feed
flavor
them.
every
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And then when they get home, they can say, "Oh, that thing that I had, that was really good. Maybe I could
Yep.
do something similar." And then that's where, as you said, the education part of it comes in. So having like hands-on classes like that's so awesome for people to learn more. And taking a little bit of a turn, something you said kind of jogged something in my mind. You'd mentioned that you're super classically French trained, and we have the
Yep.
brigade, we have the mother sauces. Those are probably all still kicking around in your head, like all of that stuff. Do you think somebody going into culinary school, like, is that still a thing? Like, there's so many other like nationalities that we're focused on, but do you feel like French is kind of like the foundation still, where you can like, where every chef kind of like knows this language type thing?
Yeah. So, okay. So, it's interesting. Like I said, I worked in a lot of great restaurants and hotels before I ever went to culinary school. I got a degree in criminal justice and then decided to go to culinary school. And then, of course, when I was going to culinary school, I was working at the Breakers, 14 plus hours a day in some of the best restaurants in the country. And I learned more in culinary school than I thought I was going to learn. And I still apply it to this day, including, the culinary math, the terminology,
Yep.
properly cooking chicken to, au point, or, a doré crust on a perfectly pan-seared, or we talk about
Yep.
fond. So those
Mm-hmm.
terms, I think, are forever. And then,
Yeah.
as the president of the ACF chapter of the Chefs of the Low Country, and I'm also an approved certified culinary, I do the test exams. So
Oh,
for
nice.
certification
Oh, for
exams,
ACF.
correct.
Yes.
So I
I've
just
seen
did,
that happening. So you have to
yeah,
be very serious. You have to put on your poker face, because they're not messing around, and they don't like to
no,
joke around with you. And I learned that the hard way. They're
no,
very,
no. Yeah,
very
it's,
intense. Yeah, because you're watching like each and every step that they do. It's not just the finished product. You're watching how those chefs do each and every part of it. It's
and
yeah,
it's tough. I mean, they put
I
themselves out
know.
there. We just
Yeah,
did a test
yeah.
last week, and imagine having 3 certified chefs standing around or watching every move that you do. And, if it's
No,
for
no, no.
even, the certified executive chef, or the certified chef de cuisine, or the sous chef exam, that's why I said, I think exactly what you were talking about. Everything is still relevant. And
Yeah.
if you still have to know how to cook classically, even if you're throwing molecular gastronomy, and you have to know
Hmm.
how to properly sear and season food before you put it
It's
into
it's the
a cryovac.
foundations.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And you can tell when somebody just runs wild and they don't understand like what, the basis of it all, for
Right.
sure. And then let's see, the last thing that I wanted to ask you is if you have any sneak peeks for us, anything coming up. You gave us quite a few with all the different concepts coming up. Anything else you wanted to share that we can look forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, we never stop being innovative. We never stop
Always
thinking
happening.
outside the box. I'm working on a pepperhead concept for 2025,
Ooh.
which is exciting. We haven't gone there. We're doing my team is like knee deep, I think, right now in patient development. We developed 110 new recipes over the last 60
Whoa.
days that spread to our top 4 diets, which is like, I think, 73% of our patient population. But just think about like, what that looks like if you're a regular diet or cardiac or heart healthy or
Yeah,
consistent carb patient. You're getting the same meal as now the regular diet patient, and there's
that's
no
a huge
differentiation.
deal. That's a big
Correct.
difference. Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just excited about it because I geek out about food.
Nerd alert.
Yeah,
I do
exactly.
too. Yep.
But if it's we just did a burrito taco bowl, which burrito tacos
Oh,
are so
yes.
on trend. But once
Hmm.
again, if you deconstructed that and did a bowl build, what would that look like, and how cool would that
With
eat as a
with the
patient?
consomme would be kind of like you could
Yep.
soak that up in something. Oh yeah, I love it.
Or we just did a pozole. A lot of it
Oh
is,
yeah.
I think, what you talked about is, I call it global Americanism, because America as a huge melting pot. It's
Hmm.
not even just regional Americanism anymore. It's now global
Right.
Americanism, where
Yeah.
we're such a melting pot in every city or town that
Hmm.
when we're taking care of our clients in the Pacific Northwest, we have congee now on our breakfast menus for patients.
Oh yeah.
So, and then down in the Southwest, we have to have a pork and hatch chili stew for breakfast, or a
Hmm.
pozole, or
Hmm.
a menudo. And then, of course, in the South, we have shrimp and grits on our patient menus. So
Yes.
I think that's a lot of the research and development that we're doing, is that, like I said, that global Americanism. If it's Gullah Geechee recipe development
I was just
here
about to
in
bring that up
Savannah,
because I
Georgia.
want to put a pin in that. And I always want to learn more about that Gullah Geechee foodways. So
Right.
you and I are going to have to talk more and share more information about that and that's where your region is. So that's
Yep.
a big part of the Low Country. Very cool. For
No, I
sure.
love it and would love to talk to you more about it. And yeah, come on down and we can go actually experience Gullah Geechee cuisine
Oh,
straight
I
from the
would love
source.
that. Yes, let's absolutely do that. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here. We will stay in touch. We're so
Yeah.
proud of everything that you're doing. Thank you so much for feeding these folks.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.